Happy game day again, everybody. I'm Matt Scalisi, joined here by Ben Flanagan for our Alabama pregame show. One more regular season game this year for Alabama. They have made it through undefeated so far, heading for what they hope will be a historic finish to the season for Alabama, but easier said than done. And we'll get into what Alabama can accomplish today and what it could mean for the entire season and for the history of the program, Ben. But before we do that, a lot of folks today are enjoying a game day atmosphere that they've had to sort of create for themselves this year. It's been a different year for fans. We're not going to the normal hangouts and dives and tailgate parties that we're used to, but some people have I would say put a little bit more time and money into creating that perfect game day atmosphere for themselves this year. And you did a post for AL.com showcasing what exactly this guy did. It's pretty stunning, and I think a lot of Alabama fans will appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, we're less than an hour away from kickoff where Alabama has an opportunity to finish out an undefeated regular season, but this is all anybody can talk about on Alabama fans' social media right now. It's a man in Gadsden and a University of Alabama graduate who has recreated the famous Galette's Bar, a staple of the Strip in Tuscaloosa, in the basement of his home. It's amazing. He has built what looks like a complete to scale replica, but this is about 1,000 square foot recreation of the bar. It's a recreation of its form prior to the 2018 renovation, when they just like blew the place up and made it a completely new and bigger, different looking bar. But I mean, this is amazing. The layout is perfect. It has the concrete slab floor, the pool table, the tattered house rules sign on the double doors, Alabama football memorabilia all over the bar, the correct old photos that the bar also had. I mean, it's a time warp. It transports you back to a very specific time and place. And he's made a lot of people happy this morning.
Yeah, let's take a look at some video of it real quick if we can. Ben, I can almost taste Yellowhammer a little bit.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like I said, if you didn't feel transported just then, if you have any familiarity with Galette's and that bar, if you went to the University of Alabama, if you're an Alabama fan, then you probably went there at some point, even if it was just once. And if it was just once, you probably didn't forget it. And you know that is exactly what it looked like. I can only imagine what it smells like in there too. So
probably a lot better than the real thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's really a pretty amazing accomplishment there, just in terms of like a carpentry standpoint. This guy's not a professional. He does it as a hobby. He's obviously very skilled, and it seems like it's more than that. But he scoured through his own and friends' old Facebook photos of the place so that he could locate every different aspect, nook and cranny of it to recreate it perfectly. So job well done by that guy. And there are people on Twitter right now who are like bowing at his feet based on the work that he did. So well done, sir. And he completed this during the pandemic when he and everybody else had a lot of free time. So it goes to show what you can accomplish during lockdown.
Absolutely. And so Ben, definitely there are those among us who have watched many a game from Galette's. I don't know how excited people are going to be about the actual game today, but again, to me, when I look at this Alabama-Arkansas game, this is sort of one of those games that I think throughout the Saban era, there have been a lot of these, probably more than not, games that are sort of a part of a bigger picture, right? You can't break records. You can't break season-long, career-long records without a bunch of games along the way that maybe individually are not very memorable, but they're part of a campaign. And I think that's kind of how Alabama tends to view lots of things under Nick Saban. It's about seeing the bigger picture. while never letting up on an individual item. So today, as far as this game goes, Ben, what do you feel like is the thing that Alabama needs to be most focused on accomplishing today?
Finishing, and that's the word that Nick Saban has used for the last several years, especially when Alabama doesn't win a national championship and they don't finish the way that they want to. And yes, that includes against a team like Arkansas, who is not a bad team by any stretch. Their record indicates that they might be. They've been very competitive this year. Their last 3 games would not tell that story. They've struggled. They've given up a lot of points, and if you've given up a lot of points, you're obviously given Alabama a lot of film to chew on, especially with that explosive offense. But I mean, look, you want to go into this game and you want to take it seriously. I mean, honestly, I think a challenge might help Alabama. If Arkansas is more competitive than people think they'll be, Alabama needs to focus moving forward, and a challenging game from Arkansas might help them do that ahead of this Florida game, because they can't take anybody lightly anymore. They've got to finish the regular season undefeated. They're obviously qualified for the SEC championship, but they've got to win that game. I mean, a lot of people think that even if they lose to Florida, they'll march right into the playoff, but it obviously will depend on how they lose to Florida if that happens. So they've got to fully focus now. It's nothing but serious, important football. It's win or go home. They have to have that mentality.
In terms of Arkansas and what they bring to the table today, it's a team that I think the record is a little bit deceiving. They've played an incredibly difficult schedule in their first season under Sam Pittman, but they've really been pretty competitive, even in the games that they've lost. And they probably, a lot of people would say they should have a better record than they do right now, especially folks who watched the Auburn Arkansas game earlier this season. But there are a couple of things I think Alabama fans will want to keep their eyes on. Felipe Franks is the quarterback for Arkansas, who started his career at Florida, has been a really efficient and at times pretty prolific passer for the Razorbacks this year. But to me, one of the interesting ones is Treylon Burks, who is a receiver for Arkansas, who has not really become the same household name as some of the other receivers around the league this year. But he's actually the 4th leading receiver in the conference. So basically, you're talking about Elijah Moore, who Alabama fans already saw from Ole Miss this year, tore up this Alabama defense. You've got, obviously, Devontae Smith. And then you've got Kyle Pitts at Florida, so who Alabama's going to see next week. I think it's an interesting matchup today to see how this Alabama secondary handles really the best other receiver. This is as close as Alabama can get, I think, to being tested by an elite receiver before things kind of really fully kick into postseason mode next week.
Yeah, I mean, Burks had 200-plus yards against Missouri last week, and I know Missouri gave up, 48 points in that game, and maybe their defense isn't technically as good as Alabama's, but it's an SEC defense, and so this guy's been putting up numbers the entire season. Since game 1 in a loss to Georgia, he put up more than 100 yards, so he's extremely talented, and he's somebody who will give Alabama that secondary that has shown so much improvement during the 2020 season. He'll give them something to work with today. That's for sure. But I mean, again, you just look at Arkansas's resume. Again, and what are they, 3-6 at this point? But again, you have losses to Georgia, losses to Texas A&M, some of which were closer than they were. They beat Mississippi State. We'll see if Auburn can do that today. A very close loss to Auburn that a lot of people, including Arkansas, I'm sure, thought that they should have won. But yeah, you look at these last 3 games, including a close loss to LSU, and it's been rough. But they have an opportunity now to really end their season in a way that could be very special with a home upset win against Alabama. I'm not saying that's going to happen. Obviously, that's not realistic, but you never know. Alabama has gone into Arkansas a heavy favorite before and come out of there barely winning. I remember back in 2014 when Blake Sims was quarterback, they couldn't move the ball hardly at all, and it took a very late touchdown to escape with a win and preserve a season that ended up going to the playoff after they had already had a loss. So Arkansas can be dangerous. You never know. Even though Nick Saban's undefeated against them, it's interesting that this is the last game of the season, and I think Alabama might be a little happy that the Iron Bowl is in the rearview mirror and the LSU game is now in the rearview mirror. All they have to do now is beat Arkansas at Arkansas to finish this season undefeated.
Well, they're definitely focused on getting the win more than anything else, but there are a couple of other milestones that can get accomplished today for individual players on this Alabama offense, which obviously has been spectacular all year. Not surprising to hear there are guys in in the territory of breaking records. I guess a little surprising in that this is only a 10-game regular season, and normally we'd be talking about a 12-game season. So pretty astonishing that these guys have done what they've done against overall stronger competition across the whole season than what an Alabama team would typically face. But let's talk about a little bit of these, a few of these today, Ben. One record that is on the precipice of being broken here it is for Devontae Smith, who has already shattered so many records. He needs 2 more receiving touchdowns to break the. Am I right about that, Patrick? We have 2 more receiving touchdowns that Devontae Smith needs to set a new record, and then he also needs 50 yards to break an all-time receiving yards record in school history. But Ben, the one that I think is probably and look, 50 yards that and 2 touchdowns, those are 2 records that I think Devontae could probably get pretty quickly. I think he was well beyond that after the first quarter against LSU last week. But another one to me today that I think could get broken, but I'm not 100% sure, and I want to know how you feel about it. Najee Harris, who is basically in his second year as a full-time starter at running back for Alabama, needs 177 yards to be the all-time career rushing yards leader in school history, breaking the records of Derrick Henry and Sean Alexander, I believe, is the other one that's still ahead of him. So 177, it's not unheard of, Ben, and it's doable. How do you feel like this one shakes out today?
I don't know. And I think Bobby Humphrey is just ahead of him by 5 yards. So he's technically in 4th place on the career rushing yards record in the record books. So I don't know. He could do it today. I mean, he had 200 yards earlier this season against Ole Miss, I think. So he's capable of having a huge game. I mean, the guy is just a touchdown machine. He's a workhorse. He's a guy who can do literally everything at the running back position. So I'm not going to underestimate him in terms of whether or not he can break this this career yards record today. Very possible. And he's a guy who belongs on a list of names like Derrick Henry and Sean Alexander and Trent Richardson and Mark Ingram, 2 guys he's already ahead of. So Najee Harris has stamped his place in Alabama's history books, and he can just keep going from here. And it's just going to be amazing if he does that. I think a lot of people wouldn't have thought that he was already that high in Alabama's rushing record stats, but man, he's put in the work. And you're right, this is his second year, whereas like Derrick Henry, who put up what he did in just 1 year as the featured back, was just astonishing.
Yeah, that one is safe. That one's safe, by the way. Derrick Henry's single season rushing record is probably never going to get touched at Alabama. I can't imagine. He had 2,219 yards back in that 2015 Heisman season, which is absolutely absurd. I can't see anybody beating that, but who knows? Maybe one day.
Yeah, almost 600 yards more than the next guy, which was Trent Richardson, who had nearly 1,700 yards. So you're right. I mean, unless something just cataclysmic happens, not happening anytime soon.
No, 1,000-yard season is still a huge accomplishment in college football. So, and Najee is already past that today. Probably going to have his best season of his career at Alabama at this point. So, a remarkable record. We'll see. I think also, Ben, today, even though I think next week is probably going to matter more, the Heisman race is still ongoing, and Alabama's got 3 guys, I think, that could genuinely be finalists when they finally get to that point. So we'll see what today's events do in terms of affecting the Heisman race as well. Ben, thanks for joining me. Ben and I will be back here for the post-game show as soon as this game is over. So until then, everybody enjoy your day, hopefully inside watching football. You may not have a replica of Gillettes in your basement, but hopefully you have some at least relatively fun setup for yourself for the final regular season game of this 2020 football season. Ben, we'll see you after the game.
Sounds good. I've got